Welcome to the H.D. Smith Pharmacy Podcast Series, recorded live at the NCPA Annual Convention and Exhibition in October of 2017. This podcast series is dedicated to independent community pharmacy owners throughout the country, and the topics and discussions are near and dear to the H.D. Smith team. H.D. Smith is the only national drug wholesaler dedicated exclusively to independently owned pharmacies and has been since 1954. H.D. Smith's consultant-style proactive account management helps pharmacies thrive and improve profitability in today's changing market. Share all these podcasts in this special series about topics and issues impacting the profitability and survivability of privately owned pharmacies with other owners and operators. Help us spread the word about supporting independently owned pharmacies. And now, here's the founder and host of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, Todd Urey.
This is Chris Smith with H.D. Smith, and you're listening to the Pharmacy Podcast.
Hey, we are here at the NCPA 2017 annual conference, and I tell you what, I've been part of the H.D. Smith team this entire conference and been interviewing some very interesting people, but I have to say I have favorites, and this interview is my favorite. I get to interview Mr. Chris Smith with H.D. Smith. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast, Chris. How are you?
Thank you, Todd. I'm fine.
So I tell you what, I've been a customer of H.D. Smith myself with my buying group. I've been friends with several of your executives, but I never had the actual opportunity of meeting you, so this is quite a treat for me to interview you on the show.
Well, I hope not to disappoint.
So give us a little background. Tell us, from your perspective, a little bit of the history of H.D. Smith.
Well, H.D. Smith was founded by my father, Dale Smith's father, Dale being CEO of all of H.D. Smith. I'm CEO of the drug division part of H.D. Smith. It was founded by our father back in 1954 in Springfield, Illinois. Grew as a single house for many years up until 1995 when we began to expand, acquiring Texas Drug, later Barnes Wholesale, and growing also in the Florida, New England, and New York markets. So we now have a national presence today, but still founded on the values that our father established.
And that's really the meaning of community health care and what independent pharmacies are doing for community health care. And I'd like to know from your perspective, what's the future of independent retail pharmacy look like?
Well, that's an interesting question because when I joined the industry full-time back in 1980, the prognostications were that independent pharmacy was not going to survive, and that most of the independent pharmacy owners were in their late 50s or 60s, and there was not going to be anybody to replace them. Well, it's more than 30 years later, closer to 40, and I don't see a bunch of centenarians walking around here, so I think those prognostications were inaccurate, and for those that feel that independent pharmacy doesn't have a bright future today, I would disagree because of my experience over my career has been that independent pharmacies are best able to adapt to changes in healthcare.
So what about the growing need for other healthcare services coming out of community pharmacy? What are your thoughts on providing immunizations, providing pharmacogenomics testing, providing other services like the quick care clinics to really expand the services in communities that sometimes don't have any other healthcare services than the community pharmacy?
Well, I think it's part of a larger change in focus in healthcare from treating sick people to managing people's health. And I think it's a very exciting and quite literally healthy change in our approach as a country to the health of our citizens. And I think independent pharmacies and pharmacists are in an excellent position to lead this change. They, for many years, have been one of the top respected professions in our country, either number one or number two. In 2001, I think the firefighters passed them up after 9/11, but and certainly we respect their sacrifice. But year in, year out, independent pharmacies are very respected as for their professionalism, and are the most accessible healthcare professionals for patients. And I think they can leverage those relationships to manage health of their patients better than other pharmacists in other settings. So that I see as the way in the future for independent pharmacy, and that's part of why we at H.D. Smith have invested in Arate, which is a PSAO, because I think it's very important for independent pharmacists to be able to access patients, and they need strong representation with the PBMs to do that, and also they need support in developing the services required to drive patient outcomes, and I think that's where the future is. And at Arate, that's a big component of what they do.
You've seen independent pharmacy grow and transform your entire life because of this being a family-run business. And from the beginning of your life, you've experienced pharmacy at different levels. What do you think the biggest obstacle to being a successful independent pharmacy, independent community pharmacy owner is today, and what can H.D. Smith do to help to alleviate that obstacle?
I think if I have to pick one, I think the biggest threat is access to patients, because if you don't have access to patients, you're dead in the water right from the start.
Right.
And that's why I think, something like Arate that I mentioned is very, very important, because, traditionally as a wholesaler, we're focused on distributing product at the most economical price with the best services around it. But that doesn't help the independent pharmacy get access to patients. And as PBMs wield a lot of power, and there's a bias there towards bigness because they're big organizations, and it's very easy for them to leave the independent pharmacist out, when in fact the independent pharmacist can best drive, I think, the kind of outcomes PBMs are looking for. So I think with Arate and the thousands of pharmacies that it represents, it can guarantee access to patients for independent pharmacies. Now, a close second to that threat, access, is margin. And that's not unrelated too. And again, as a wholesale distributor, we're as focused as we can be on providing an economical price for pharmacies to buy their products at, but that's only part of the equation, because there's what you buy it for, but there's also what you sell it for. Again, representing them with PBMs to be sure that they are being reimbursed at margins that they can be successful at, I think is also critical to their success.
Chris Smith, H.D. Smith, it has been a pleasure and an honor to interview you on the Pharmacy Podcast as part of the H.D. Smith booth here at the NCPA conference, and I thank you.
Thank you, Todd. I greatly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
We thank you for listening to the H.D. Smith Pharmacy Podcast Series, recorded live at the NCPA 2017. To learn more about topics impacting the independent pharmacy community, be sure to listen to all the podcasts in this 12-part series. As a reminder, H.D. Smith is the only national wholesaler dedicated solely to independent pharmacy owners. H.D. Smith's success is directly related to the success and profitability of privately owned independent pharmacies. To learn more about H.D. Smith, visit hdsmith.com.